All right. So welcome everyone. This is the Science of Edible Plants. My name is Monica McCoubrey, and I am the Wildlife Education Specialist with the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission. So today, like I mentioned, we are going to talking about edible plants. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here for everybody. This is a very obnoxious orange color, but it works. So, all right. So like I mentioned, today's edible plants, if you've joined one of our Science of or any of our virtual programs before, you do know that if you have any comments and questions, we'd love to hear from you in the chat, but also just keep them relevant to what we're talking about today, and we will be good to go. All right. Also, I just want to point out, like I do every time, I am by no means an expert in any of these subjects. I don't pretend to be an expert. This one was a little bit more tricky for me just because it is plants, and plants are definitely not my forte. So it was a lot of research, looking through books and papers and talking to people. And if I, messed up some information, or someone out there is by they're kind of deeming an expert, please help me answer some questions. And like I always say, that if I can't answer a question, or if Amber can't find the answer to the question while she's moderating, we will find someone that can answer that question and we will get back to you. So thanks again for joining us. And again, I'm learning just like you all are. So. All right, so we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about what wild food is, and foraging and hunting and gathering, and what are all these different words and what do they mean, and how are we going to talk about them. So really quick, kind of just the meaning of wild food. When we talk about this, it kind of is something that appeals to everybody. Everyone has thought about, can I eat those berries, or can I eat this or this edible? I know that I have a 3.5-year-old, and she used to, and still does, put everything in her mouth. So finding something in nature and being able to eat it, that appeals to a lot of people, even those that sometimes are what we call disassociated with nature, or maybe nature is not their happy place, but it is something that appeals to everyone. Also, when we talk about foraging, it's one of the oldest things that humans have done. So Homo sapiens and their ancient relatives and ancestors up to 2 million years ago, and even up to 12,000 years ago, we were hunters and gatherers. And so that we were literally born to do this, and we were built to do this. But now a lot of us, and there's a lot of different reasons, and we'll talk about some of those reasons here in a little bit, but we're looking for a way to better connect to the land. And one of those things is foraging, or finding those wild foods. So finding and foraging our local foods helps us kind of get a better connection and a deeper connection to the world around us, especially our local ecoregions or our areas. It also helps us make a better connection between soils and healthy foods and healthy people, and really figuring out where our food comes from. So it also, again, builds that greater environmental awareness as well. There's a lot of different things that go about as foraging. It's not just picking up a plant and eating it. Is there contamination in the soil? Is it getting enough sun? Is this in a good area for it? Is it an invasive species? Is it a threatened species? So it just builds, again, that environmental awareness. So it is kind of all encompassing when we talk about foraging. All right, so why should we forage? So I just really quickly want to point out when I say forage, what do I mean? So basically it's gathering and or searching for wild food resources. So these are edible things that people can eat. Why do we want to do this? A lot of people, especially if you ask a lot of our urban area in Nebraska, we are 66% urban. What are we doing? Why do we need to go outside and get our food? It's ready in the grocery store for us. You just go pick it up. You pick up your celery stalk, you come home, you cut it up, you wash it, maybe not even have to wash it anymore. You buy peppers that are already cut into pieces for you, and all the seeds are out. Anything really is cut up and just ready to go for you. So why would we want to go out and spend our time in the hot sun trying to find something that we can eat? Well, there's many reasons. So nutrition is one of them. The taste, the variety. Sometimes people are a little bit more thrifty now. Even emergency preparedness, and even just a convenience. It might be even more convenient than going to the grocery store. It also, again, puts us in touch with that natural world. It also helps us build that deep and kind of like a primal satisfaction as far as our like ancient roots of being a gatherer or a forager. We also feel better, and we feel better when we eat like local food. So wild foods, they're a little bit more nutrient dense. They're a source of that unprocessed minerals. It might be an alternative to those commercial supplements that we talk about a lot. And it also, there's a lot of food sensitivities now that could be one of those solutions because it is so very innocent. It's very untouched as far as being messed with by people. And then people will also, again, build that greater value in the wild. Basically, figuring out more what's going into our neighborhoods, what's going into our parks, what's happening with our gardens. So again, you're just building that better connection to nature as well. All right, so that's a little bit about what we talk about when we say foraging. So I'm going to talk about just a few kind of foraging basics here, and then we will talk about some different plants that we can eat here in Nebraska and how we would prepare them. All right, so when you are a forager, you have to know a lot of things. It's not just going out and identifying plants, even though that's a lot of it. You must watch for caution. So you must be certain of your plant identification. We also have to think about if we introduce new foods into our diet, that could have adverse reactions as well. So it's just something to think about. So the best thing that I can do is educate yourself. And I don't mean read every book in the library. That's very helpful, but go with someone that is very interested in this. They know what they're doing. They know where to go. They know what to look for. Find someone that this is their thing and they know it. That's the best way to learn this. Also, just get outside. So to be a forager, you have to be in connection with nature. You have to know your wild plants. You also need to start paying attention to the cycles of the year. So understanding that phenology or nature's calendar. You have to understand the weather, the bloom times. So you must spend time outside. And that sounds like a duh moment because you're foraging, you're outside. It's a lot more than just going outside. It's understanding all those cycles that go along with plants and the bloom times as well. You also need to gather field experience. So this is something, again, that you just don't take a book out and you go identify a plant and you eat it. You have to get that experience, and it is a skill that is acquired over time. It's not something that you just learn very quickly. We also have to keep sustainability in mind. We are land stewards. So is it an invasive species that you're looking? If it is, take it all, but also how do you take it so that other seeds aren't viable for a while? Or how do you take it if it's a threatened species or an endangered species? Do you take it if it's an endangered species? All those questions that we have to kind of figure out. Also, we have to be careful that we don't want to take all of it because then there won't be any left. So how can we carefully harvest these plants so that that plant then can continue and reproduce over time? One of the things also is get permission. So we'll talk about that here in a second, but over time you will basically learn a lot about what's called a microclimate. So finding a certain plant or a fungi or whatever you're foraging for and understanding that specific climate that comes with that plant. Is it always found at the base of an oak tree? Is it always found when it's wet or after a rainstorm? Understanding how those things again fit into those ecosystems. So it's not just about that relationship with us and the food, but it's a relationship with the plants and the earth as well. We also have to remember, leave them in better shape than when you found them. And that might sound funny because you're foraging, you're taking some of it, but you're not pulling up the whole plant. So again, understanding how to forage and how to prepare these things. Something that you also have to remember is Nebraska, especially if you're here. I know other states are very different, but we are 97% privately owned land. You can't just go out and grab stuff. So you have to get permission. Literally, unless it's in your front yard, you probably have to figure out where you can get that permission from. You have to have legal permission to gather. It's very different depending if you're doing it in a city park or a state park or a federal land. There's a bunch of different rules about that as far as foraging, hunting, gathering. They can be found a lot of the times if you just go to those websites or those certain areas, it will tell you what you can and cannot do. Also, if you're on private land, get permission. Something that you also have to be cautious of is just safety above all else. So know your plants, look for soil contamination. This is something especially in agricultural areas and urban areas, which again, Nebraska, 66% urban, 97% privately owned, and we are a farm state. So understanding what is going into that soil. And then also different tools, a lot of different things, whether you're getting something that grows underground or you're pulling something off, or you have to dry something, you're going to need certain tools. So it just varies depending on what type of plants or parts of the plant that you want to harvest. All right, so just a huge disclaimer, never eat a plant unless you are 100% positive of that identification of the plant and certain that the part that you intend to eat is edible in the condition which you have harvested it and prepared it. So again, if you are not 100% sure of what you are eating, do not eat it. Also, do not mentally force your plant to fit a description. So a lot of times when we talk about animals and different species, we say, well, it's the scales are smooth enough, or I don't think that's really a triangular head. Well, that can make a very big difference as far as like a snake or a different type of animal. So do not force a plant to fit a description that you think in your head. The example that I have here is the leaf margins are smooth enough. If someone says you need smooth leaf margins, you need smooth leaf margins. It is not, well, that's smooth enough. Also, never identify a plant based on just a single characteristic. There's lots of different plants that look very similar, that have certain characteristics that are very similar to each other. Sometimes it's one or two things that make them different from each other. Also, if you need a book to identify a plant, you are not ready to eat it. Books obviously help, and field guides help a lot, but again, go with someone that is specialized in this or that really knows what they're doing. So I would probably not feel comfortable eating more than maybe about 5 or 6 plants. Dandelions, I know what a dandelion looks like. I am 100% positive that I know what a dandelion looks like and how I would eat it. And then also do not taste or eat any part of the unidentified plant under any circumstances. So if you don't know what it is, do not taste it. Just a safety precaution. All right, so that was kind of just a little bit of basics about foraging, but I also want to talk a little bit about how, what different parts are we looking for of the plant, or what certain big categories are we talking about when we talk about foraging. So one of the things that people forage for are greens. So this is the edible, kind of the leafy portion of a plant. So if you go to a grocery store, you will notice those cultivated greens like spinach, collards, lettuce. These are those really, again, the leafy portion of a plant. These have very low calories, they're high in fiber, they're very high in minerals, and actually very high in proteins as well. When you gather greens, you're looking for the newest and the youngest growth. They're going to taste better, they're going to have less fiber and be more digestible as well. They will also usually be smaller in size. They're not going to be these huge lettuce leaves like you see in the grocery store, but they're going to be lighter green in color, and usually they will break off easily. They're going to have that crunch to them. And then the most abundant in spring and early summer. So the farther that we go into summer or even fall, the plant gets a little bit more hard and dry. Some of the plants will flower, and then again, they will still get drier over time. So early summer and spring is the best time to pick them. Otherwise, again, they lose their flavor and the nutrients as they dry. Some of the plants are the greens that you can eat them raw, just wash them off or maybe tap them off and just eat them. Other times they sometimes are spicy or aromatic. They are sometimes bitter, even when you taste them. So they need to be cooked down or prepared a certain way. All right, another category is our shoots and our stalks. So there are two different things here. So when I say a shoot, this would be something like a cultivated version would be like your asparagus. We do have wild asparagus in Nebraska. And then your stalks are going to be things like rhubarb and celery. If you know anything about rhubarb, do not eat the leaves. That is something, again, where one part of the plant is edible and the other part is not. So shoots and stalks, the younger, you want them tender stems. This is going to be lots of different plants have these. They're usually produced when biennials or perennials grow rapidly, when they use that stored energy over time. So they're tender because the plant has yet to produce that cellulose, which kind of makes it really stringy. So again, most of these stalks, or sorry, most of the shoots are going to look like those asparagus, and I'm sure all of us know what asparagus looks like. Available mostly in the middle of spring and into early summer again, because they're just more tender. A lot of us tend to look at height when we want to pick something. This is not a good indicator of readiness. You want to look at the thickness to height ratio. You want tiny and unopened leaves, and you want stems that are more tender and flexible. Also, when you're harvesting, don't just pull it up. You want to either bend it or pinch it off, and then left to dry will make it kind of tough, so you want to eat it right away. You can eat them raw, but a lot of people do prefer to cook them. All right, so your underground vegetables. Most people, they call something underground a root, but if you're a botanist, you know that this is like, this drives you nuts. There's tubers, there's stems, there's rhizomes, there's taproots, there's lots of different things. So it's not just a root underground. These underground vegetables are really a good source of quality calories. So they're less fibrous, they're kind of a milder flavor. They have a lot more digestible parts, and they're better used as kind of like a bulk of a meal instead of like a side salad or something like that. Most of the calories that you're going to eat in here are going to be carbs, best from late fall to early spring. And usually they're ready when the above portion of the plant is dormant. So when you do this, try not to damage when you harvest them. So here's another example of when you need those certain tools. So you might need a pair of diggers or a trowel. But again, you have to know how to dig them up without damaging that plant so that it can still reproduce. Also, when you do harvest them, you want to make sure you keep them cool and out of the light. You want that non-digestible carbohydrate called inulin to basically be broken down. So the only thing about these is when you eat that inulin, it's a substance that passes into your lower digestive tract, which is overall broken down by bacteria. It produces a lot of gas. So when you cook it, it kind of breaks down that inulin. So again, the longer that you wait, that inulin in the plant will be converted into simple sugar, and it will have a little bit more of a sweeter flavor. All right, and then you have fruits and berries. So this is a huge category. There's lots of variety, shapes, colors, flavors, sizes. The calories are from simple carbs and lots of vitamin C. When you forage them, it's best to use a very shallow container, because the more that you pick, they're going to crush themselves. So I know it's kind of a pain to keep undoing it and refilling it, but you want a shallow container, not a deep container. You also want the small soft berries. These ones you want to eat right away, because they're going to rot or they're going to get really kind of mushy over time. So I want to eat those first. The fruit that has thicker skins on it will last longer. And a lot of these you can just like eat right off the plant without any preparation, but some of them, like crab apples, are very sour or tart, and you're really good in things like jams and jellies or syrups. All right, and then you also have seeds and grains. So this is also a very big category when you're looking at this, and there's a lot of species that have edible seeds on them, but a lot of them are just so small and labor intensive to get off. It's really not worth it for a human to do this. But grains are harvested by basically you knock or beat them against a basket or a container, or you basically just strip them off the plant. You can harvest the entire plant and let it dry. Therefore, you have more seeds that will ripen. But a lot of the times with our seeds and our grains, they come with a lot of inedible and like unwanted stuff on them. So you want the seeds, but you don't want all the other things. But they should be dried right away, because you don't want to collect that mold. Basically, if you leave them out on a tarp in the sun for a few days, they'll get ready and dry, and then they can be stored for a long time after that. And when we talk about grains, this is anything from like our seeds, nuts, our pits, our kernels, any edible part of those plants. All right, and then nuts. Nebraska actually has quite a few, if you didn't know, but they're often served as this is like a dietary staple for our gatherers and our hunters. So most abundant, this is like practical food source. It's a lot of good calories, there's starches, their proteins, their carbs, lots of different things that people need. Some can be kind of picked directly from the bush. Some of them you wait till they fall to the ground, like walnuts. Most of the time, check to make sure that they are not empty or wormy. They're a lot of labor intensive to get like a walnut out of the shell. So you want to make sure that what you're getting out of there is not gross or wormy already. They're the most easily stored wild foods. Some of them can be left in a shell for up to a year or more and still maintain their flavor. Some can be cracked with a hammer. Some of them are a little bit more labor intensive where you need like a nut pick. There's starchy nuts, which can be made and even into like a flour, or there are those oilier nuts. These can make nut butters with, so like a very fancy peanut butter or almond butter. All right, so that was like our big categories. So now I'm going to go into some of our edible plants. Some of these you might be like, yeah, I knew I could eat that. Some of them I was even like, whoa, you can eat that? So this is kind of interesting, but let's go ahead and check if we have any.
We had a few questions, Monica.
Yeah.
One of them was from Karen. She asked, do Nebraska state parks fumigate or use chemicals along trails? Krista Lang, who I know she's one of our biologists for the state.
Yeah.
She did a great answer with that.
Thank you,
she
Krista.
talked a little bit about that. And then I also just suggested it really depends, both the frequency and methodology of land management is going to depend on the area. And so if you really want to know specifics, I would just suggest maybe calling that park or calling that area.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for answering that, Krista, because I know every park is different, but yes, that is something that you absolutely have to watch for.
Yeah. And then Steve asked, if you cook an inulin bearing root a long time, will it still cause gas? I was trying to look for that.
From what I've read is that it breaks it down. It's never going to go fully away, but it won't be just like you eat it. Like if you grab a tuber and just eat it like an apple, it's going to have a lot of that inulin in it. But the more that you cook it, the more that it will break down. So I'm sure that it will never be gone, but it will just not be in such a large amount if you didn't cook it. All right.
Okay, that's all we have.
Awesome. All right, well, let's go ahead and get into some edible plants. So I'm going to talk a little bit about like what they are, where you can find them in Nebraska, and then kind of maybe how to prep them and what you would use them for. So, and again, this is not all of them. There's many books out there. There's many different species. I just only have, so much time. So we are going to only cover a few of them. All right, so one of them is cattail. So everyone knows what a cattail is. This is one of those, I am 100% sure I know what a cattail is. I could eat it. So this plant, a lot of people think they're almost like just a pest or they're in the way. When we think of a wetland, we think of like a dirty place. It smells, it has mosquitoes, but it's like a thriving resource for a lot of different foods that we can forage for. So the cattail, you can eat the rhizomes, which are kind of towards the roots. There's shoots, there's spikes, and there's even pollen from this plant. So the two photos that I have here is one that the male is producing the pollen and one where it has not yet the spike on it. So the corn dog looking thing. So both male and female parts are on the same plants, but the males will actually form that pollen about midsummer. Like I said, they're pretty recognizable. Sometimes people could confuse them with irises or even the plant called a sweet flag, but again, they're very recognizable. There's two species that we have in Nebraska. We have a common cattail and then a narrow leaf cattail. Both of them are edible. And also what I've seen is they hybridize with each other. So it's kind of hard to even say which is which. But sometimes the narrow leaves are a little bit more hard to collect. They're found pretty much all over North America. They like wetland areas. They like wet ground or near the water table. The spike, when it's immature, you can actually eat it raw or you can boil it. The cattail pollen can easily be collected, and a lot of people will make a very rich protein flour. A lot of people will also mix in some other stuff because it's just so fine. So like a lot of people will mix in wheat flour with that protein rich pollen and make things like muffins or cornbreads with it. So you can also cook the greens, which are similar to kind of like a taste to sweet corn or bamboo. And then this all starts beginning of early spring. So very easy plant to recognize, and it's pretty much anywhere. All right, another one a lot of people use are crab apples. So this is a specific species that we have here. You're able to eat the fruit. It's widely distributed across the Midwest. They get the kind of pinkish white, deep rose colored flowers, and then those flowers will eventually develop into the crab apples that we see. The fruits will ripen in the summer. Best time to collect them though is wait until they become a little bit softer, usually after like a first frost, and then collect them. They won't be as hard. But again, find them hiking trails. You can find a lot of these on public land, but again, just remember your rules and regulations about collecting and gathering. There is a growing season, does affect the flavor. So a lot of the times we don't have control over that. If it's a dry season, you're going to have drier fruits. If it's a wet season, you're going to have a little bit more succulent fruits. They're a little bit more tart. If you've ever eaten just a regular apple, they're a little bit more tart, but a lot of people use them for apple butters, pies, like the fruit leathers. Removing the seeds is pretty tedious, but again, it's worth it if you really want to eat these. So this is something that there's so many of them. We don't really have to watch on how much we gather because there's not really an impact on us. So. All right, another, like, I know this plant 100%, dandelion. So this is a good starter species to forage. So it's easily found, it's recognizable. This is also one that can be found in your front lawn, so you don't have to get permission to gather it. So just be very cautious. Chemicals on dandelions, a lot of people spray for them, especially early in the spring. So just be aware, and if you're not sure, always ask. Best to gather early in the spring. The leaves grow fairly quickly, and I think all of us who don't like them in our lawn, sometimes they go from the yellow flower to the wispy little things like that. And so it's a kind of a short time to gather those leaves. They're best picked in the early morning shade because they're less bitter and they're more tender and they're sweet. So the longer that you wait to gather them, by the time the seed or the plant goes to flower, the greens are a little bit more dry and kind of chewy. A lot of people say that it has a nutty flavor. There's a lot of people that put them just on your salads. You can boil them or cook them down into a tea. There's a lot of places that you can just even buy like commercialized dandelion tea, or you can just make your own. But again, just be very careful on those chemicals. All right, here is your invasive plant, one of them, garlic mustard. It's actually really good to use in pesto. So if you're a pesto fan, you can make it on put it on soups or pastas. You can put it on crackers. It has a really good garlicky flavor. So it is a noxious and invasive weed. It grows pretty much anywhere. But when you pull it out, when you harvest it, you have to make sure that you pull the whole plant out, because even those seeds in the ground, they can last viable for years. And we want to make sure that when we take this, that we're not spreading it. We want to make sure that we're gathering everything, because it is a noxious and invasive weed. So early spring, the first year the plant will grow as kind of this basal rosette. The second year it'll make stalks with flowers and these petals. Like I said, it's pretty widespread, forest floors, edges of woodlands. It's predominantly bitter, but after a frost, it turns a little bit more sweet. It's high in vitamin C. And like I mentioned, you want to pull that entire plant to kind of help control that population. But again, great in pestos. And even if you pull it and you rub it against your hand, you smell it, it's a really good flavor. All right, this one I did not know actually. So ginkgo trees, they are not native to Nebraska, but they are found pretty much everywhere as an ornamental. They have very distinct leaves. I tried to find a photo with the leaves and the fruits on them. So these are male and female trees, and most of the time in these kind of urban or commercial areas, you will see the male trees, because the females form these awful smelling putrid drupes or fruits on them that stink. So, and people just don't like to walk on them. So when they're ready for harvest, the leaves will turn yellow in the fall, bright yellow. The leaves are also edible. A lot of people, what they will do is they will put like a tarp down and then shake the tree, and the good leaves will fall out, and just kind of keep a sheet underneath there. The fruits are also edible. The only thing is sometimes people have a little bit of a sensitivity to the fruit, so they get a rash. So wear gloves when you touch them, just to be cautious. And then also when you pull that pulpy part apart, you want to make sure that you can eat the inside. So keep your gloves on. The leaves can be used as a dry tea. You can boil the leaves for a tea. It's really high in phosphorus, copper, and potassium as well. All right, goldenrod. We have a lot of goldenrod in Nebraska, and right now it's kind of starting to be a little bit ready, about mid-August or so. There's about 20 species here in the Midwest. All of them have pretty similar properties that can be used interchangeably. Any beer people out there or people that like cocktails, this is maybe the foraging species for you. So you can gather the full stalks of the leaves and the flowers. You want to do it on dry days when it's really sunny because it has that very good aromatic flavor to it. Basically, the seeds will immediately, or the flowers will immediately go to seed once you pick them. So you need to dry them, wrap them up in a bundle, and hang them so you don't lose that flavor or those seeds. But the leaves and the flowers are really kind of a bitter color or a bitter flavor. And it's really weird when you eat them, it makes your mouth very dry, whether you drink it or you just eat it. But it's very useful in cocktail recipes, things like if you brew your own beer or make your own beer, a lot of people will do like crisp Belgian style ales or that light style of beer, and it gives it a very good like aromatic flavoring. All right, horsetail. This one's like this ancient looking plant, but it's a perennial. It grows very tall, maybe 3 to 4 feet. The stems are jointed, and I know it's very hard to see in this photo, but if you look, you can kind of see like a little line where those stems are jointed. They are hollow and they're really dry when you touch them. So basically, you want there's fertile stems and then there's sterile stems. So the fertile stems occur in the spring. They're low growing. They range in color from brown to white. And then the sterile stems are going to be green. They grow taller and they reproduce whorls of like these feathery branches, which you see here in this photo. These grow along like the bases of banks, rivers, wetlands, sometimes even dunes. And then the sterile stems can be gathered in the spring. They're really high in minerals, especially silica, which helps apparently your skin, your hair, and your nails. They can be added to a bone broth. A lot of people swear by it if you have arthritis. And then also you can gather in areas. You want to make sure, since this plant takes a lot of heavy metals out of the soil, you want to make sure that nothing has been leaking into the soil because it does uptake that. All right, here's another invasive species. This is Japanese knotweed. This one's only found in a few categories in the southeastern part of Nebraska, but it's a non-native invasive plant. It basically takes over stream banks and ditches. It's really woody, it's bamboo-like. They have these leafy stalks on them. If you look, the leaves are heart-shaped, but again, there's a lot of different plants that have those heart-shaped leaves. So again, make sure you know what you're eating. When the plant goes to flower, it produces these like feathery clusters of these blossoms that you can see here in this photo. And then again, since this is an invasive species, you want to make sure that where you're gathering this, or if you do gather it, that it's not been treated with an herbicide. How can you tell? You ask, or even, again, you ask, but you also can tell by looking at different plants that it could have that plant burn on them or be brown. So you want to gather the stalks before they get about 8 to 10 inches. After that, they become really woody and inedible. You can snap them off or you can trim them with pruners. The larger stalks you can actually peel like you would rhubarb. Just telling everybody, it is considered a natural laxative. Just saying, just putting that out there. But foragers are pretty much the only known predator of these plants. So take all of it. But again, you want to make sure you know how to take it so as not having that plant reproduce all the time. All right, this is a pretty one. This is jewelweed, sometimes called a touch-me-not. But it's a tall succulent annual plant, and it has this really cool root system with a shallow hollow stalk that is neon translucent green. They're tall, they grow around 3 to 5 feet tall, and when you crush them, they're very juicy. So in July and about August, so about right now, you can find these flowers and they will have this like tubular orange colored looking thing on here. And the way they get their name jewelweed is that the drops of water will fall onto the plant and it kind of glistens like a jewel, but they have this really waxy coating on the leaves. One word of caution is usually when you find this plant, you find poison ivy. So just kind of keep that in mind. But the stems are succulent and they're really similar to like crunchy green bean sprouts. They're good in spring rolls, or a lot of people swear by them in, I guess, like spicy Asian soups. And then the leaves can also be cooked down. They're very tender, kind of like spinach, and they cook down really fast. All right, another species that we're probably all familiar with, this is your juniper species. They're very common. They are the predominant flavor in gin. So if we have gin people out there, this is the flavor that you like. So both the berries and the needles can actually be edible. A lot of people will use the needles to rub on like spices for meats. Things like fish or pork or red meat. It's a good flavor. A lot of people will also eat the berries. They will put them in like cocktails or desserts, but you can also dehydrate them and then you can store them later. But they do make a nice, if anyone makes homemade like hollandaise sauce or mayonnaise, this is also a good flavor to that. But they're also good with like currant desserts or dark chocolate as well. All right, sumac. This one's really fun because I did not know that you can make a lemonade out of it till about 3 or 4 years ago. I've tried it once and it was pretty good actually. So we have 2 species of sumac. We have smooth sumac and staghorn sumac. Both species have this very tart, tangy berries, or the drupes that develop later on in the plant. A lot of people will use those for desserts or beverages. You can see these things pretty much anywhere. You get that pretty recognizable drupe in the middle later in the summer, but then you get these really pretty leaves as well. And sometimes they even kind of take over too. But very common, they're native shrubs. You can find them in banks, woodlands, hedgerows. They get ripe through about July through September. And what I've heard and what people have told me is that how do you know if they're ready is you go over, make sure you know what they are, you taste a pinch of the drupe, and if it tastes sour, but it leaves a pleasant aftertaste, then you pick it. If you taste it and it does not leave a good aftertaste, move on to the next plant. It's just not ready yet. You want to make sure that when you do harvest them, you use them immediately or you put them in the refrigerator because they will lose their flavor. But you take a few tablespoons and you can make a really kind of a pink lemonade drink. But a lot of people also use the drupe to flavor their meats again to kind of make a rub. All right, red buds. These are, again, a pretty ornamental plant, but they're also found natively. Small tree, only grows about 20 to 25 feet. They get these purple flowers. You can eat the leaves, but then they also develop these pods later on. So in early spring, they will get these seed pods to develop. Another word of caution for these is that if you do gather the leaves, you also want to make sure that you leave enough if you want to gather the seed pods. If you don't care about the seed pods, that's fine, but otherwise you won't get the seed pods if you take all the leaves. So you want to gather the leaves when they're still green and tender. Otherwise, they become dry and chewy as the season progresses, and that's not something that people want to eat. They kind of have a slightly sour flavor, but a lot of people will steam them or chop them and put them into salads. And then the seed pods, a lot of people will saute them and put them into things like stir fries. They kind of are very similar to fresh green, like seed pods or pea pods. And then make sure again that when you harvest them, you leave enough as that more seedlings can grow. All right, pawpaws. These are called the Midwest false banana. So the fruit is similar to the banana as far as a flavor and as a texture. It's also very nutrient dense. So these trees get very large, about 30 to 40 feet. Apparently, when the leaves are bruised, it smells like used motor oil. I don't know the smell, but that's what I've read multiple places. They get these maroon flowers later in the spring. They color and the flavor, I guess, the color and the odor, it smells like rotten meat and it attracts the pollinating flies. But the fruit is green, it's smooth skinned, it kind of looks like a pear, but the skin's more like a cucumber. Not like a banana. If you bruise it, does it become discolored? It does not affect the taste in a pawpaw. But the flesh of the fruit is white and it's best eaten right away or if you freeze it. But you remove the seeds, you peel it, and you slice it. A lot of people will mash it and put it into something like a tapioca or rice pudding. It's high in vitamin C, magnesium, iron, copper, and the good fatty acids. All right, stinging nettles. No one likes these, but you can eat them. So if you like spinach, you'll probably like nettles. They have a similar flavor to spinach, but they're pretty versatile when it comes to greens. They're even more nutrient dense than spinach. They're high in minerals. And as far as like protein in plants, they're very high. It's a perennial plant. And again, this is a key identifier. There's lots of different types of nettles, but a key identifier is that they sting. So they have fine hollow hairs that are filled with this like formic acid that basically breaks open onto the skin. When you cook them down, that goes away, it dissipates. So you want to make sure with gloves, you pick tender leaves before the plant goes to seed. You want to, again, harvest the smaller plants because the stems are going to be more tender. Wear long pants, wear gloves when you're harvesting and when you're processing in the kitchen. You can eat them fresh or you can use them in cooked dishes. Can easily replace spinach, but a lot of people will cook them down and use them in soups or quiches or other things like that. The dried leaves can also be added to soups or even make like a tea with them as well. Just make sure you really dry those needles or the leaves out. All right, I think this is our last one. This is milkweed. So a little bit of a cautionary thing right now, if you've been paying attention, the IUCN listed monarchs as endangered, and this is one of the species that they utilize. So we want to make sure that we leave the parts so that other species, especially monarchs, can use them. There's a lot of other species that utilize milkweeds as well. But it's not just for monarchs. We can use it as well and eat it as well. It's a native perennial. We're looking at the common milkweed here. They have these fragrant, showy flowers on them. The pods will develop. This is where the seeds will come in later. But the milky white sap, if you break open the leaf or the stem, it's not poisonous, but in certain people, it does cause a rash. So just again, if you have sensitive skin, you might want to be wearing gloves when you do this. But the shoots are ready to harvest in early spring. The flowers can be picked in the summer and the pods are ready about midsummer. The new shoots can be harvested and are very similar to asparagus. The harvest buds before, and you can kind of see them here, before they turn pink, they look like little broccoli rosettes. You can just cut those off and use them. A lot of people will just put them in a replacement of broccoli, but the shoots can also be used in things like soups, quiches, egg casseroles. A lot of people will use them. And then the buds can be used in stir fries or soups. The flowers can actually flavor lemonades or, again, your many different types of adult cocktails. So. All right, so that was it. There's a lot of species that I did not cover, and I know I didn't, but I only have so much time and I didn't want to overwhelm you. There are a couple of really good resources that I use and some great books out there. And again, this is not a way to identify plants. If you need to take the book with you, you're not ready, but it does give you more of a little bit of idea of how to use these and what species you're looking for. And it does give you a place to start. So everyone that registered for this program today, I will send out an email tomorrow with an evaluation and some resources in it. And I will include those two guides that I really used to get a lot of this information. And they're just really good guides to use to kind of begin your journey into foraging. So we only have a couple of Science of left. So we have one next week and then the week after that. And then we are done until I think October. So next week is going to be our Science of raptors. And if you're not familiar, this is not velociraptors. This is like birds of prey. And so if you want more, if you really liked this, we have a playlist Science of on our Nebraska Game and Parks Education YouTube channel. I will also link the video directly in the email as well. We have a Facebook page. We have an Instagram page with a lot of good information and photos. And then we also have our Nebraska Wildlife Education website as well. All right, so thank you everyone. Next week, we're gonna do some birds of prey. And I think that was it. So I think we have questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and see if we have any questions. So
we had one question is, Someone asked, will this PowerPoint be available after this? And so do you commonly share your PowerPoint in that email as a PDF or something?
So I do not share my email as a PDF. It is in the recording. So people can obviously stop and take notes and watch it as many times as they wish. But
Okay.
I have not shared PowerPoints before, but if someone's really interested, yes, I would share it as a PDF for you.
Okay. And then we just had some lovely comments. It seems like we have some good foragers in the crowd. So Steve had
Yes,
mentioned,
I'm glad. I love people's
Right.
experience. Yes.
Steve had mentioned dandelion leaves before flowering are delicious, cooked as greens too. Monica, have you ever eaten dandelion greens?
I have once. I'm not a huge
I just had them in a
salad
salad,
person.
not cooked.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I use them in a salad. So, but I've heard the
Nice.
tea is really good as well.
Yeah.
Dandelion tea.
And then Moni said pawpaw fruit have to be dead ripe or can cause stomach upset, speaking from experience.
Good to know. Yes, again, and this is something that, again, if you are unfamiliar with it and you see a pawpaw and you eat it, you might not know that. So again, go with someone that knows what they're doing. And again, really, really read up on this and educate yourself before you do that. So thank you.
And then we have Linda had mentioned use only common milkweed.
Yes.
Like I think you mentioned that, as other species have more alkaloids in them and taste really bad. So that's good to know. Michelle had asked, can the pods be eaten? Can the milkweed pods?
They can, and I can't remember some certain ways, but I know that pretty much almost everything on that common milkweed can be eaten, the pods as well, before they get dry and go to seed, obviously. But again, midsummer they're available, so yes, you can use them. I think what I remember is a lot of people would like fry them up and put them in stir fries. They're kind of like pea pods, so something like that. They're just going to be a little bit larger.
Okay. And then, Steve had also mentioned nettles need to be cooked in a change of water or they will make your mouth tingle.
Very good to know.
Painful. I had somebody cooked stinging nettle pesto for me once, and that's the tip that they had said. Pesto was delicious. So cool.
Yes.
Allison has asked, what's the law or statute say about harvesting on Game and Parks wildlife management areas? Good
question, Allison. I am not 100% certain on that. And I would believe all of them would have similar rules and regulations, but I'm going to be honestly and truthful. I do not know what they are. And this sounds really bad, but foraging has become kind of a new thing that's happened as well. And I'm not sure if a lot of Game and Park staff would even know either. So we might have to dig for you, but I will do some digging and figure that out and send it in an email for people tomorrow. So, and if I don't find that out by tomorrow, I will find that information. I will get it to you, but that's a very good question as far as what that law is about harvesting. I'm sure it's on our regulations and rules somewhere. I just have to find it. So
yeah, that's it's a valid question though. And then Colburn said we need an in-person outdoor training on these.
Yes, if anyone's interested in this, there's very few people that I know of that are, I would deem experts in this subject. So if someone does know an expert, please email me. I would love to do an in-person training on this because I think this is something that, like I mentioned, it's kind of becoming more of a new thing. And with the price of food being so high and people wanting to connect more to nature, it's something that's becoming more common. So yeah, I'm open to it. I just need someone that knows a lot more than I do.
That's all.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. Like I mentioned, I will get that email sent to you with the link and everything, probably hopefully by tomorrow, if not by Monday as well. So thanks everyone for joining me. And I will hopefully see everyone next week for Raptors. Thank you, everyone.